The late-night gas station, it was one of those nights where the air felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I'd been on the road for hours, driving back home after a grueling work trip. My eyes were tired, my back ached from sitting too long, and all I wanted was to get home, crash on my couch, and forget about the week I'd had. The GPS had led me to this lonely gas station off the highway, the kind of place that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. The flickering neon sign buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow over the empty parking lot. I pulled up to the pump, stepped out of my car, and immediately felt the chill of the night air. That's when I noticed him. There was a man sitting on a bench near the station, just outside the circle of light from the overhead lamps. He was slouched forward, his face shadowed by a hoodie, but I could feel his eyes on me. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just another tired traveler like me. But something about the way he sat there, perfectly still, made my skin crawl. I started pumping gas, keeping him in my peripheral vision. Every time I glanced over, he was still staring, unblinking, like he was waiting for something. My hand tightened around the pump handle, and I told myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. When I finished filling up, I decided to go inside to pay. The automatic doors slid open with a faint hiss, and the fluorescent lights inside were almost blinding compared to the dim parking lot. The clerk, a middle-aged guy with a bored expression, barely glanced at me as I walked in. But as I approached the counter, I felt it again, that prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I turned around, and there he was. The man from the bench had followed me inside. He stood a few feet away, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his hoodie, his eyes locked on me. I couldn't see his face clearly, but his gaze felt heavy, like he was trying to bore a hole through me. The clerk suddenly became very interested in rearranging the gum display, avoiding looking at either of us. I hurriedly handed over my cash, muttered a quick thanks, and bolted for the door. Outside, the night felt even colder. I glanced toward my car and froze. The man wasn't inside the station anymore. He was standing right next to my driver's side door, just a few feet away. His hood was still up, but I could see his mouth now, twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. My heart started pounding as I fumbled with my keys, trying to look calm, but feeling anything but. I forced myself to walk toward the car, every step feeling like it took an eternity. As I got closer, he didn't move, didn't speak, just kept staring. I unlocked the door, slid inside, and slammed it shut, locking it immediately. My hand was shaking as I turned the key in the ignition, and when I looked up, he was still there, standing too close, watching me like I was some kind of prey. I peeled out of the gas station, my tires screeching against the asphalt. My rearview mirror showed the man still standing there, his figure growing smaller as I sped away. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was just some weirdo trying to mess with me. But then I saw it, a beat-up truck, its headlights flickering, pulling out of the gas station behind me. My stomach dropped. I told myself it was a coincidence, that he was just another driver heading the same way. But when I turned onto the highway, the truck stayed right behind me, matching my speed no matter how fast or slow I went. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. I kept glancing at the mirror, hoping he'd take an exit or turn off somewhere, but he didn't. He just kept following, like he was glued to my bumper. The road stretched out ahead, dark and empty except for the occasional glow of distant streetlights. I tried to think of what to do. Should I call the police? Pull over somewhere? My mind raced, but every option felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random, that he'd chosen me for a reason. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I decided to take the next exit, hoping to lose him in the maze of suburban streets. But as soon as I signaled and turned, the truck followed. My breath hitched. This wasn't just some creepy guy anymore. This was something worse. I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew I didn't want to find out that I drove faster, weaving through the empty streets, my eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. The truck was still there, its headlights like two unblinking eyes staring into my soul. I tried to think of a plan, any plan. I couldn't go home. I didn't want him knowing where I lived. I thought about driving to a police station, but I had no idea where the nearest one was. My phone was in the passenger seat, but I was too scared to take my hands off the wheel to grab it. Every turn I made, every street I took, he was right there, relentless. It felt like a nightmare, the kind where you're running but never getting anywhere. Finally, I spotted a well-lit 24-hour diner up ahead. It wasn't much, but it was something, a place with people, with witnesses. I pulled into the parking lot, my tires crunching over the gravel, and parked right under one of the bright overhead lights. My hands were shaking as I turned off the engine and grabbed my phone. I looked in the mirror, expecting to see the truck pulling in behind me, but it wasn't there. The street was empty. I scanned the parking lot, my heart still racing, but there was no sign of him. No beat-up truck, no hooded figure, nothing. Just the faint hum of the diner's neon sign and the sound of my own breathing. I sat there for what felt like forever, waiting for him to reappear, but he didn't. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. I stayed in the car for what felt like an eternity, my eyes darting around the parking lot, half expecting him to materialize out of the shadows. But he didn't. The longer I sat there, the more the tension in my chest began to ease, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. Why had he followed me? And why had he stopped? I kept replaying the events in my head, trying to make sense of it, but nothing added up. Finally, I forced myself to get out of the car and walk into the diner. The bell above the door jingled, and the warm, greasy smell of food hit me like a wave. A few tired-looking patrons glanced up from their coffee cups, but no one paid me much attention. I slid into a booth by the window where I could keep an eye on my car and the street outside. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with a name tag that read March, came over and poured me a cup of coffee without asking. "Rough night?" she said, her voice raspy but kind. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. You could say that. I wanted to tell her everything, to ask if she'd seen a beat-up truck or a man in a hoodie, but I didn't. What would I even say? Instead, I sipped the coffee and stared out the window, my mind racing. The street outside was quiet, almost too quiet. Part of me wanted to believe it was over, that I'd lost him for good. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end, that he was still out there, waiting. After about an hour, I finally worked up the courage to leave the diner. The coffee had done little to calm my nerves, but the normalcy of the place, the clatter of dishes, the low murmur of conversation, had grounded me a bit. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face, and scanned the parking lot again. Still nothing. My car was right where I'd left it, untouched. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, staring at the empty street. The rational part of my brain told me I was overreacting, that the guy was probably just some weirdo who got his kicks scaring people. But the other part of me, the part that had felt the weight of his stare, wasn't so sure that I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. The streets were still empty, and the further I drove, the more I began to relax. Maybe it really was over. Maybe I'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But as I turned onto the highway, something caught my eye, a flicker of movement in the mirror. My stomach dropped. There, several car lengths behind me, was the beat-up truck. It was back. My heart started racing again, and I gripped the wheel so tightly my hands hurt. How'd he found me? I hadn't seen him leave the gas station, hadn't seen him at the diner. It was like he'd been waiting for me, biding his time. I pressed down on the accelerator, my mind spinning. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't let him follow me home, that I took the next exit, my mind racing as I tried to think of a way to lose him. The streets here were darker, quieter, lined with rows of houses whose windows were mostly dark. I made a series of quick turns, left, then right, then left again, hoping to throw him off. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear in my ears. I glanced in the mirror and saw the truck still there, its headlights cutting through the darkness like twin beams of dread. I was running out of options. Then up ahead, I saw it, a police station, its lights glowing like a beacon. I didn't even think. I just swerved into the parking lot and slammed on the brakes. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. But when I looked, the truck was gone. The street behind me was empty. I sat there for what felt like forever. The dispatcher's voice faint in my ear as I tried to explain what had happened. A patrol car pulled up beside me, and an officer got out, asking if I was okay. I told him everything, the gas station, the man, the truck, the chase. He listened patiently, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Without proof, without the truck or the man, there wasn't much he could do. He suggested I file a report, just in case, and offered to follow me home. I declined. I didn't want to go home. Not yet. Instead, I drove to a friend's house, where I spent the rest of the night wide awake, replaying every detail in my head. To this day, I don't know who that man was or what he wanted, but I do know one thing. I haven't stopped at a gas station late at night since. The car broke down, and the man with the suspicious bag, it was one of those nights where everything fell off from the start. I just finished a late shift at work, and my head was heavy with exhaustion. The roads were eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound. The hum of your car engine, the crunch of gravel under your tires, even your own breathing. I was driving through a suburban neighborhood I didn't know well, just following my GPS to get home when my car sputtered and died. I cursed under my breath as I realized I'd run out of gas. My phone was almost dead, and the nearest gas station was a couple of miles away. The air was cold, and I could see my breath as I stepped out of the car, pulling my jacket tighter around me. I started walking, hoping I'd find someone who could help, or at least a well-lit area where I could call for assistance. That's when I heard the low rumble of a car engine behind me. I turned around, and a beat-up sedan pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and a man leaned over from the driver's seat. He looked to be in his late 40s, with a scruffy beard and a worn-out baseball cap. "You need a ride?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an edge I couldn't quite place. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed not to get into a stranger's car, but the cold was biting, and I was desperate. Against my better judgment, I nodded and got in. The car smelled weird, like bleach and something metallic, something I couldn't put my finger on. As we drove, I noticed a large duffel bag on the back seat. It was bulky, and the way it was wrapped made it look off. The man kept glancing at it in the rearview mirror, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The man didn't say much at first, just kept his eyes on the road and his hands tied on the wheel. But then, out of nowhere, he started talking. It was like a switch had flipped. He asked me where I lived, how long I'd been working in the area, and if I had any family nearby. His questions were casual, but there was something about the way he asked them, like he was probing for information, not just making small talk. I gave vague answers, trying to keep my voice steady, but my heart was pounding. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The smell in the car was getting stronger, too. That metallic tang mixed with the bleach. It made my stomach churn. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The bag on the back seat wasn't just wrapped in fabric. It was stained. At first, I thought it was dirt or maybe oil, but as we passed under a streetlight, I saw it clearly, dark reddish-brown patches that looked like dried blood. My mind raced, trying to come up with a logical explanation, but there wasn't one. The man caught me staring and quickly glanced back at the bag, his jaw tightening. He muttered something about it being work stuff, but his tone was off, like he was trying too hard to sound casual. I felt a surge of panic. I needed to get out of that car, but we were in the middle of nowhere, and I had no idea where we were going. That's when he suddenly pulled over near a dead-end road, saying he needed to check something in the bag. My hands were shaking as I unbuckled my seatbelt, trying to come up with a plan. The moment the car stopped, my instincts kicked in. The man got out, mumbling something about the bag shifting during the drive, but I wasn't buying it. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and I saw him open the back door, his hands hovering over the bag like he was hesitating. That was my chance. I fumbled with the door handle, my fingers trembling so badly it took me 2 tries to get it open. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. I stepped out, trying to keep my movements calm so he wouldn't notice right away. My mind was racing. I needed an excuse, something believable to get away. "Hey, I think I left my wallet back in my car," I said, my voice cracking slightly. He turned to look at me, his eyes narrowing. For a second, I thought he wasn't going to let me go. But then he nodded almost too quickly, like he was relieved I was leaving. "Yeah, sure," he said, his voice flat. "You go get it." I didn't wait for him to change his mind. I started walking back the way we came, forcing myself not to run. Not yet. Every step felt like an eternity, my back prickling with the fear that he'd come after me. I could hear him rustling with the bag behind me, and I didn't dare look back. When I was far enough away, I broke into a run, my breath coming in short, panic gasps. I didn't stop until I reached a well-lit street, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. I called a friend to pick me up, and when they arrived, I couldn't even explain what had happened. All I knew was that I'd been inches away from something terrible. When my friend picked me up, I was a mess. I couldn't stop shaking, and my words came out in a jumbled rush as I tried to explain what had happened. They kept asking if I wanted to call the police, but I didn't know what to tell them. What would I even say? That I got into a stranger's car and saw a suspicious bag? It sounded ridiculous when I said it out loud, but the fear was real. My friend drove me back to my car, and we filled up the tank at the nearest gas station. The whole time, I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that beat-up sedan pulling into the lot. I couldn't shake the image of that bag, the stains, the way the man had looked at me when I got out of the car. It was like he knew I'd seen too much. The next few days were a blur. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I'd overreacted, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept replaying the details in my head. The smell in the car, the way he'd asked those questions, the way he'd glanced at the bag like it was something he needed to protect. I even drove past the dead-end road where he'd stopped, but there was nothing there. No sign of him, no sign of the car. It was like he'd vanished. Part of me wanted to forget it ever happened, but another part of me couldn't let it go. I started locking my doors the second I got in my car, and I avoided that neighborhood altogether. Even now, months later, I still get a chill down my spine whenever I see a car like his on the road. I don't know what was in that bag, and I don't think I ever want to know that I never reported what happened to the police. Part of me regrets that now, but at the time, I just wanted to put it behind me. I told myself it was better not to know, that some things are better left alone. But every now and then, I'll see something that brings it all rushing back. A car that looks like his, a duffel bag in someone's back seat, even the smell of bleach. It's like my brain won't let me forget, no matter how hard I try. I've tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was just a weird coincidence, but deep down, I know better. That man wasn't just some random guy giving a stranger a ride. There was something wrong, something dark, and I was lucky to get out of there when I did. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that I narrowly avoided something terrible. I don't know what was in that bag, and I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten out of that car when I did. Sometimes I wonder if I should have done more, if I should have called the police, or at least try to remember the license plate. But the truth is, I was too scared to think straight. All I could do was run. I don't know if that man was a killer, or a kidnapper, or something else entirely, but I do know this. I'll never forget the look in his eyes when he glanced at that bag. It wasn't just curiosity or concern. It was something darker, something I can't quite put into words. And I'll never forget the smell. That metallic, sickly sweet smell that still haunts me to this day, that I've tried to move on, but it's not easy. Every time I hear about a missing person or a crime in the area, my mind immediately goes back to that night. I can't help but wonder if that man had something to do with it, if that bag held something, or someone, that would explain everything. But I'll never know for sure. The not knowing is the worst part. It's like a shadow that follows me everywhere, a constant reminder of how close I came to something I can't even name. I've become hyper-aware of my surroundings now, always checking my mirrors, always locking my doors. I don't trust strangers anymore, and I don't think I ever will. Even now, years later, I still have nightmares about that night. I'll wake up in a cold sweat, the smell of bleach and blood still lingering in my mind. I'll see his face, those cold, calculating eyes, and that bag, always that bag. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully shake it. All I know is that I got out of there alive, and for that, I'm grateful. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I can't help but wonder, what if I hadn't? What if I'd stayed in that car? Or if I'd been just a little slower, a little less careful? I don't like to think about it, but the thought is always there, lurking in the back of my mind. And I know it always will be. The stolen wallet and the friendly driver, it was one of those nights that started out fun, but ended in a way I'll never forget. I'd been out with friends in the city, and by the time I left, it was already past midnight. The roads were quiet, almost eerily so, as I drove toward the outskirts of town. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt, just me and the hum of my car's engine. But then, out of nowhere, the car sputtered and died. I tried to restart it, but nothing happened. My heart sank as I pulled over to the side of the road, the kind of lonely stretch where the streetlights are few and far between. I grabbed my phone, but of course there was no signal. I sat there for a moment, trying to figure out what to do, when I saw headlights approaching in my rearview mirror. The car slowed down as it got closer, and I felt a mix of relief and unease. A man rolled down his window and asked if I needed help. He looked normal enough, mid-30s, clean-cut, with a friendly smile. I explained my situation, and he offered to drive me to the nearest gas station so I could call for assistance. I hesitated, but the thought of being stranded out there alone made me agree. I grabbed my bag, locked my car, and got into his passenger seat. He seemed nice enough, making small talk about how dangerous it could be for someone to be stuck out here alone. I nodded along, trying to shake off the nagging feeling in my gut. The gas station wasn't far, he said, just a few minutes away. But as we drove, I couldn't help but notice how quiet the road was, how the trees seemed to close in around us. When we got to the gas station, I felt a wave of relief. It was one of those 24-hour places, brightly lit and reassuring. I thanked the man and reached into my bag to grab my wallet, thinking I'd at least buy a bottle of water or something for his trouble. But my wallet wasn't there. I froze, my stomach dropping. I was sure I'd had it with me when I left my car. I remembered putting in my bag before locking the doors. I started digging through my bag frantically, but it was nowhere to be found. The man watched me quietly, his expression unreadable. I tried to stay calm, but my voice shook as I asked him if he could take me back to my car, so I could check if I'd left it there. He agreed without hesitation. But as we got back on the road, something felt off. The route he took didn't look familiar, and the further we drove, the darker and more secluded the road became. My heart started pounding as I realized we weren't heading back the way we'd come. I tried to keep my voice steady as I pointed out the window, saying, "I think we missed the turn." He just nodded and kept driving, his hands tied on the wheel. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. The trees loomed taller, the road narrower, and the silence between us grew heavier. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, but deep down, I knew something was very wrong. Finally, after what felt like forever, we pulled up to my car. I was so relieved to see it that I almost didn't notice the way the man parked his car at an angle, blocking mine in. My eyes darted to my car's passenger seat, and there it was, my wallet, sitting right where I'd left it. But how? I was sure I'd taken it with me. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it, but I didn't have time to think. I needed to get out of there. I thanked him quickly and reached for the door handle, but he didn't unlock the doors. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to look at him. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight, his hand still gripping the wheel. "You're welcome," he said, his voice low and calm. But there was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. I tried the door handle again, more forcefully this time, but it was still locked. "Can you unlock the door, please?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't respond right away, and the silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he turned to look at me, and the friendly smile he'd had earlier was gone. His eyes were cold, calculating. "You should be more careful," he said slowly. "Leaving your wallet like that, someone could have taken it." My blood ran cold as I realized what he was implying. He had taken it. He'd had the whole time. And now, for some reason, he'd brought it back. But why? My mind was screaming at me to get out, to run, but I was trapped in that car with him, and I had no idea what he was going to do next. I don't know where I found the courage, but I snapped. "Unlock the door. Now." My voice was sharper than I expected, and it seemed to catch him off guard. He hesitated for a second, then reached over and hit the unlock button. I didn't wait. I shoved the door open and practically fell out of the car, scrambling to my feet. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely get my keys out of my bag, but I managed to unlock my car and yank the door open. I could hear him getting out of his car behind me, his footsteps crunching on the gravel. I didn't look back. I just threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, hitting the lock button immediately. He was at my window in seconds, knocking on the glass. "Hey, you forgot something," he said, holding on my wallet like it was some kind of joke. I didn't respond. I just turned the key in the ignition, praying my car would start. It sputtered at first, and for a horrible moment, I thought it wouldn't turn over. But then the engine roared to life, and I didn't waste a second. I threw the car into reverse, forcing him to step back as I peeled out of there. I didn't look in a rearview mirror until I was back on the main road, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. He was gone, but the fear didn't leave me. Not then, and not for a long time after that. I drove straight to the nearest police station, my mind racing the entire way. When I got there, I told them everything. The broken down car, the man, the wallet, the way he'd blocked me in. They took my statement, but without a license plate number or any real evidence, there wasn't much they could do. I sat in that station for what felt like hours, my hands still trembling, replaying every moment in my head. What if I hadn't noticed the wallet was missing? What if he hadn't brought me back? What if my car hadn't started? The questions kept coming, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been inches away from something much worse. Even now, months later, I can't drive down a lonely road without my heart racing. I keep my doors locked at all times, and I never, ever accept help from strangers. That night changed something in me. It's not just the fear of what could have happened. It's the realization that I'll never really know what his intentions were. He could have just been a weird guy who thought he was helping. Or he could have been something far more dangerous. I guess I'll never know. All I know is that I got lucky. And sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night, I still see his face in my mind, that cold, calculating stare, and I wonder if he's out there, waiting for someone else.